Halo's third installment was the game to remember from 2007. Backed by unseen levels of hype and Bungie's proven track record, it seemed as if nothing would match Halo's impact on the industry. After all, to this day, I still think this is the best game ever made. However, in November, one game emerged that managed to stand toe-to-toe with Halo and change the first-person shooter genre for years to come.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
This isn't a Call of Duty and Halo comparison video, but rather a detailed look at how Call of Duty 4 established the franchise as the best-selling FPS series in history. This, of course, wasn't always the case. In the space of 4 years, Call of Duty released their initial trilogy. All set during World War II, these entries were great, with the second title in particular worthy of high praise. The mechanics and level design from Call of Duty 2 still hold up to this day. However, whilst COD had developed a loyal community and positive recognition from critics, compared to today, the franchise was nowhere near its sales figures. The original trilogy sold 17.6 million copies, but these figures are up to 2013, and the actual numbers from around the time range between 790,000 to 2 million copies for each game. By contrast, Halo 2 sold 2.4 million copies within 24 hours of release. Sales are not a way to judge a game's quality, but they are unfortunately a way to judge popularity, and clearly COD wasn't exactly appealing to the masses. After Call of Duty 2, many of Infinity Ward's development team promised to never work on another World War II title again. Several different directions were attempted, but ultimately the studio decided on a modern setting for their next entry. The team did not want to use real-life conflicts, instead crafting a fictional one encompassing Russia, the US, and an unnamed Middle Eastern country. This time around, Infinity Ward devoted a portion of their staff to permanently work on multiplayer, which probably explains part of the game's huge success. Overall, development was very smooth for Infinity Ward, except for the fact that halfway through they scrapped most of the game, and come November, they were confident that their new title was going to be one to remember. And they were right. Critically and commercially, Modern Warfare brought the Call of Duty series to new heights, winning multiple awards, high scores, and selling 10 million copies by June 2008. Clearly something had changed for Call of Duty, and although it wasn't the single player that generated this change, I want to talk about it first. As previously mentioned, Infinity Ward decided on a fictional setting, mainly a civil war in Russia and the rise of an anti-Western leader in the Middle East. This is the backdrop for our conflict, in which we take control of two characters, one for the SAS and one for the US Marines. Most importantly here, these are mute characters, allowing the player to just focus on what's happening around them. The first major thing that Call of Duty 4 introduces is sprint, which is pretty much a certainty in nearly every first-person shooter nowadays, and this popularity can be traced back to Modern Warfare. It's a simple addition that majorly changed the way Call of Duty was played, for better or worse. In contrast to previous titles, Call of Duty 4 has a modern setting, and thus modern equipment, vehicles, weapons, etc. Snippets of this modern tech can be felt right throughout the campaign, but crucially Modern Warfare retains the simple gunplay from previous CODs. In general, the movement and mechanics feel amazing for 2007, albeit a bit dated today, but pointing and shooting is still as satisfying as ever. Multiplayer is really where Modern Warfare's new additions shine, but the simple changes to its core gameplay really helped it reach the next level, and this can even be felt in campaign. The levels here are linear, not as replayable as you'd like, and it certainly doesn't last very long. But the experience you do partake in is sublime. The set pieces, variety in level design and objectives really enhance Modern Warfare's campaign. The story is great too, not generating any headlines but doing enough to invest the player and connect them with the various characters and conflicts. The single player hits its peak after Safe House, where you learn of the connection between Khaled al-Assad and Imran Zakhaev.
I was just a lieutenant back then, doing some wet work. Chernobyl, Christmas for the bad guys. Even a decade later, a lot of them still used it to get their hands on nuclear material. A lot of them, including one, Imran Zakhaev. Of course, we couldn't just let that happen. Cash for spent fuel rods. That's one hell of a recipe for destruction. It was the first time our government had authorized an assassination order since the Second World War. I was under the command of Captain Macmillan.
All Gillied Up gives me chills just thinking about it, never mind playing it. Set in one of the most isolated, eerie and haunting locations, All Gillied Up mastered the balance of stealth gameplay and Call of Duty's typical shooter mechanics. In an interview with GameBrain, game designer Mohammed Alavi explained the process he went through to produce such an epic mission.
All these different pitches happened and I kept a tally in this little sheet. And I said, okay, 5 votes for that level and 6 votes for this. It's called scoutsniper.bsp, that's the actual level internally. But all Gillied Up ends up ranking the lowest. it was like, I think it was like 60% yes. Compared to like, 70s and 80s and 90% yeses. Okay.
Nobody wanted to make that level.
Nobody wanted to make that level.
Including me.
You're in a clearing, and you walk up to this bush that's nestled between these 2 trees, and there's 2 enemies on the other side of that clearing. You bring your gun up and you're about to aim at them, and the bush turns towards you and says, "Hold up." And I'm like, I'm sold. I was like, that's all I needed. It was that moment where like the bush turned toward me and spoke to me, and I was like, I've got it. I've got the level.
Inspired by games such as GoldenEye and Metal Gear Solid, Mohammed had produced the best level of 2007 and one of the best of all time. Guided by Captain Macmillan, the mission is a throwback to the original Half-Life games, truly immersing the player in cinematic moments through gameplay, where they are fully in control. The ghillie suits, combined with a silent sniper and copious amounts of foliage, allow players to really engage with the stealth gameplay, which is notably a contrast to most other levels. Call of Duty's campaign would go on to receive critical acclaim, especially for its aforementioned mission, which influenced many levels in the years to come. However, Modern Warfare's biggest stamp on the first-person shooter genre wasn't its single-player campaign, but rather its bold, fleshed-out and addictive multiplayer. The reason Call of Duty has dominated the top-selling charts, friends' most played games, and wish lists of 10-year-old kids for years now is Call of Duty 4's multiplayer. As previously mentioned, the original trilogy didn't exactly generate the hype and revenue that it perhaps deserved to. And yet, within a year, Call of Duty had sold more copies than its main rival. How? Well, let's take a look. I have mentioned the setting, but I think it warrants further discussion. You see, not only had Infinity Ward began to get tired of World War II, but so had gamers themselves. It's no coincidence that Modern Warfare kickstarted a generation of modern-day shooters, and its at the time fresh setting was quite enticing for players. And yet it was a familiar setting, weighted in reality and down to earth for most people. Frankly, it was perfect, and a big reason why many first-time players were initially attracted. Killstreaks were a new addition for Modern Warfare, and have trickled their way in some form or another into many other shooters. The concept is simple: kill a certain amount of enemies without dying and you get a reward, which leads to further kills, and yeah, you can already see the positive feedback loop. These would later become score streaks in later CODs, but even if playing an objective based game mode, Call of Duty 4 would only care about your kills in terms of in-game benefits. This would lead to some shady camping tactics and could lead to some very unbalanced games, but ultimately it was a fantastic element to Call of Duty's formula. Suddenly players had an incentive to play even better, and I'll get to the progression system later, but this was an almost in-game form of progression, easily obtainable yet so addictive. Create a class was another groundbreaking feature for Call of Duty, so uncomplicated yet influenced many games even to this day. You choose your weapons, sure, but what about attachments, grenades, and even perks, which were added bonuses that could change how you play in subtle ways. Alright, not all of these perks were subtle, but they nonetheless added an extra layer to multiplayer. Create a class allowed players to suit their tools to their style of play, rushing with a P90, holding an area with an M4, or picking off people from range with your M40A3. This would actually go hand in hand with the map design, which was absolutely top notch. Crash, Bog, Vacant, Call of Duty 4 had some brilliant maps, and nearly all of them catered towards many different playstyles. Call of Duty 4's progression system is very straightforward, and yet like killstreaks and create a class, it kept players hooked for years. The idea is that you rank up from 1 to 55, each rank slower than the last, but this exponential rise isn't as extreme as you'd think. It's only minor. Each level you rank up unlocks weapons and perks, expanding your combat choices and giving you bigger reasons to keep playing. Once you go past level 55, you're given a choice: prestige and go back to level 1, or stay at 55. And with 10 prestiges, this 1 to 55 cycle could almost be repeated indefinitely. It's crazy how the thought of repeating a progression system multiple times over sounds boring, and yet Modern Warfare made it so engaging and compulsive. Cosmetic customization is not something the industry has done right in years, but much of its allure emerged from Call of Duty 4's camos. Yet again, the concept is easy to grasp. Kill a certain amount of enemies using headshots, and you will unlock a particular camo on that particular gun. There were only 4 basic camos to unlock, albeit one of these, gold, was only for certain guns, but nonetheless this gold drove players to play hours on end, chasing a particular skin on their favourite gun. As well, with so few camos available and no microtransactions, it meant that the best camos, mainly Red Tiger and Gold, really stood out. They also encouraged you to stick with particular guns, for better or worse. This is all not to say that Modern Warfare's multiplayer was perfect. It was far from it. The M16 could be the most overpowered gun in COD history. Players could start with stupid amounts of grenades, and you could actually choose a perk to give your gun extra damage, so why choose anything else? Nonetheless, Modern Warfare's multiplayer, combined with elements of its single player, changed the first-person shooter genre for years to come, and rocketed the franchise to the top of the gaming industry. It's no wonder many games tried to copy Call of Duty 4's mechanics, and more than likely failed, because it is without a doubt one of the best games ever made. And it's no surprise that unfortunately, Halo never recovered from its rival's success.